this Rayleigh and we discussed this, right? We talked about whether it could be a compression shock, how we talked about entropy change, and then we discussed why rarefaction shock is not possible because entropy will decrease. Then other possibility is Mach wave and compression shock, which is the subject of this present chapter. Then we looked into how to basically we talked about connecting two points which are common in a Fano and Rayleigh line. So this one shows you shock. So which one is we have two points x and y. So which one is high at higher Mach number or supersonic flow is at x or y? Can anyone tell?
At x.
X is supersonic, and at y what is it?
Subsonic.
Subsonic. And what about this point A? Anything special? Can you see this point A? Correct. So these are the terms that we discussed that once you have, let me draw it here. So I'm just revising what we have discussed in the previous class. We are meeting after long. So this is, let us say you have a stationary shock in a tube. Some flow is coming and that flow is moving past the shock. So the approaching Mach number, let us say this is M1 and let us say this is M2. So in general for a normal shock, M1 will be more than 1. So we say that supersonic flow is approaching the shock which is at point X, and after the shock the flow turns from supersonic to subsonic which is M2. M2 will be less than 1 and this is your subsonic region at Y. And at A we say that A denotes the point where you have sonic conditions. So this is what we have studied for Fano and Rayleigh lines. So in a Fano line where basically when you have entropy as maximum, that is sonic condition, and similarly for Rayleigh line at B where maxima of entropy is there, then we say that this is sonic conditions. So this is basically we are trying to connect normal shock with what we have discussed previously. I hope everyone is fine with that. Now moving on, we can also say that when a flow passes through a shock, it can be assumed to be adiabatic. Okay, so basically we are not much interested in what happens with the narrow region of a shock. There are a lot of non-equilibrium processes which are beyond the scope of our syllabus or that we are not interested in, let us say. What we are interested in? We are interested in that we know the properties of approaching flow, we know the properties of flow which is moving out. So that is what we want to compare. That is what we'll derive equations for. We are not very much interested in this very thin region. Okay, I hope this is clear to you. So for our purpose, we can simply assume that the flow is adiabatic, and what it means is that the stagnation temperature remains constant. Stagnation temperature for the approaching fluid will be same as the stagnation temperature of the fluid which is leaving from the shock. T02 is equal to T01. Now, if we will also discuss about cases where the shock wave is not stationary. Okay, so this is a very simplistic example where we say that shock wave is standing or stationary in a tube. We will also see examples for example, you have aeroplane moving through the air at supersonic speed. So it will have some shock associated with it. So that is called moving shock. Okay. Now for that moving shock also, neither the total enthalpy nor the total temperature are constant across the shock wave. So this is one major difference between a moving shock and stationary shock. Okay, we'll explore more about moving shocks in later slides. Now this is the entropy equation that we have already seen in previous slides. Now from that, if let us say T temperature, there is no change in temperature, can I say that entropy depends only on pressure, stagnation pressures? Since entropy has, I could reduce into this because entropy has no depends on velocity. So here, if you look carefully, this is not a stagnation temperature, this is T2, and our assumption is that T02 is equal to T01. We are not saying that T2 is equal to T1. But what we say is that entropy has no dependence on velocity. So the difference between T02 and T2 will come because of velocity. Since entropy has no dependence, so we can remove that term and we can say that delta S naught. Okay, now we are talking about S naught will be equal to P01 by P02. Okay, sorry, I did a mistake. So basically this term will be there, T02. Okay, let me do it again. So this is for, sorry, jumped actually one step. So this is for S2 and this is for static quantities, not stagnation quantities. This equation we have already seen previously. Now I want to write the same equation for stagnation quantities. So what I will write? S naught 2, S naught 2 and S naught 1. Okay, this is for static, this is for stagnation. Now this delta S will depend on, it will have T02 and T01, right? This term will be there. Here, that will get cancelled because stagnation temperature is same. So what we are left with? We are left with P01 and P02. Okay, so which also highlights the fact that entropy has no dependence on velocity because T2 and T1, sorry, T2 and T02, they are how they are different because of velocity. Stagnation and static terms are different because of velocity change, right? Stagnation means when we assume that the fluid is brought to rest. Is this clear?
Yes.
Okay, so we end up with this equation. Now we know that for stagnation temperature I can write Cp T0 is equal to Cpt plus V square 2. Just now what I have told. So using that, I can say that even for static entropy, because entropy has no dependence on velocity. Velocity will not change your entropy. That's why we can say that even S2 minus S1 is equal to R log P01 by P02. Okay, so this is what we had in the last slide, and we know that Cp can be written in terms of gamma and R. So we have previously defined the relation for P01 and P02. So if we include that in this particular equation, just substitute for this, you will get delta S in terms of gamma and Mach number. Okay, sorry. S2 minus S1 we have defined in terms of temperature. Let me go back. So where we have S2 minus S1, I think a few slides ago. Yes, this one. So this we have derived. If you remember, you can go back. Basically, we have used the Mach number dependence and rho p. These are the equations. I hope people remember. So using that, we have defined delta S. Now that delta S I am using here. This slide. So I know that delta S is equal to R log P pressure ratio, P naught ratio, and I know that delta S is equal to this much. This is coming from previous slides. So I can simply say that pressure ratio is this. I'll just remove that log and I will express in this form. Now, what are the, so this is one important ratio for pressure, stagnation pressure ratios before and after the shock. Okay, basically you are talking about fluid properties across the shock. So what inference we can draw from this equation? So basically when you place a pitot tube, okay, so it will form a detached shock which is standing ahead of probe nose, or basically we can see that pitot tube is measuring the total pressure behind the shock. Okay, so let me just draw it for you. Now it will always form a shock. If you remember the Schlieren images that we have seen at the beginning of the lecture, this is typically how a detached shock look like. Okay, now we're basically ahead of probe nose. Okay, so we are measuring pressure here. So that is, in simple terms, I can say that I am looking into P naught 2, or total pressure behind that shock. Okay, now this, this will be a curved section, but if you look at a smaller section, you can say that this is basically like a normal shock. So it can be approximated as a normal shock. So when a pitot tube is facing a supersonic flow, it measures the total pressure P02 behind a normal shock. So this is actually will be curved shock, but if this curvature is large, and if you are looking at a very small section, you can approximate it to be a normal shock. Oh, sorry. Let me draw it clearly. So if you look at very small section, you can say that this is approximately normal. It is strictly speaking not a straight line, but approximation. I can say that it is a normal shock. Okay. Now, you know the stagnation pressure ahead of the shock. Okay. Generally, when you devise experiment, what happens is that you are having a high pressure tank from which you are letting the air to exit, and that is forming your supersonic flow. So you basically know P01. You know the stagnation pressure ahead of this shock. You know P01, which of the reservoir basically. You can determine the flow Mach number ahead of the shock. Okay, so you know the properties behind. You know the properties behind after the shock by using the, you will get P02 here. So based on that, you can correlate, or you can use normal shock equations for such type of configuration. So we'll try to see one or two examples of pitot tube. Then you will be able to appreciate how we use shock relations for a pitot tube in a supersonic flow. Okay, let us see now how properties vary across a shock. Okay, so you can see P02 by the ratio of P02 by P01. So this plot basically shows you that how these properties vary as a function of Mach number. Okay, so this is we'll later talk about strong shock or weak shock. So basically, strong shock is when your Mach number is high, incoming Mach number M1 is high, and weak shock is when your Mach number is low. So we see that how these properties vary. So for example, pressure ratio, it is 1 for Mach number of 1. Okay, which is obvious, but it keeps on decreasing as we increase the Mach number. Okay, basically what it means is that let us take a very simple configuration of shock flow in a tube. So what it means is that this is your M1, right? M1 and M2. So we'll talk about pressure or density for these two. This before the shock 1, after the shock 2. That is how we are using subscripts so far. So P01 by P02 means the stagnation pressure after the shock divided by stagnation pressure before the shock. So this ratio is decreasing. What does it mean? Anyone? Either if P01 is maintained constant, it means that P02 is decreasing, or we can say if P02 is constant, it means that P01 is increasing with the increase of Mach number. That is one way to look at it. So basically, if you keep on increasing the Mach number, here the pressure will keep on building up. The pressure difference will be higher. Okay. Secondly, you see, this is what I am talking about. So the pressure ratio P2 by P1, this also keeps on increasing as we change the Mach number. Okay, now there is an interesting question. Why P02 is decreasing by P2 static pressure is increasing? Why will that happen? Anyone? People are there or I have lost connection? What is the case? Are you able to hear me?
Yes, sir.
Okay. So what we see here is that P0, P2 by P1 is increasing with Mach number by P0 by P01 is decreasing. So why that will happen? Can anyone explain? So how do you define stagnation pressure? That will depend on velocity also, right? You people have forgot everything what we discussed or what is going on. Okay, I am leaving this as a homework. Next class I will ask you why is this so. Okay, why P0 by P02 by P01 is decreasing and P2 by P1 is increasing. The answer lies when you expand this. When you write the formula for P02, you see why this is decreasing and why this is increasing as a fact. If you use this ratio in this expansion, what is the formula or equation we use for P02, then you will see why this is decreasing. Okay, this is your homework. Find it out. You will get the answer in previous slides. I will ask it on Monday. Okay, let us look at other properties. So density ratio, rho 2 by rho 1, this is increasing with Mach number, and T2 by T1 is also increasing with Mach number. Okay, while M2 is decreasing. So basically it tells that as we keep on increasing the M1 or speed of incoming flow, this will decrease. What will happen is pressure will increase and density will also increase. That's why Mach number has to go down. So basically your flow becomes from supersonic to subsonic. See, at M1 is equal to 1 when you have the sonic conditions, then M2 is equal to this shows M2 is also 1, M1 is also 1. After that M1 is increased, M1 is supersonic and M2 is decreasing and it is subsonic. So this is a very typical characteristic behavior of a shock, that as we mentioned, flow is changing from supersonic to subsonic, which is very evident from this Mach number plot. Okay, and this we have also discussed the behavior of temperature and density ratios. This is your homework, so that we'll discuss on Monday why pressure ratios show two different trends. Okay. So generally you don't need to remember the equations or this plot. We have tables given. So this is already shared with you. If you know what is M1, if you have these values, based on that you can calculate what is M2 or pressure ratio, density ratio, temperature ratio and all that. So this you can either you can use the equations that we have derived previously, or you can straight away look from these tables. Okay, so this table is basically made by using that equation. And one catch here is that all these values are for gamma is equal to 1.4. If let's say you get a problem where gamma is not 1.4, then you cannot use this table, then you use the equation and calculate these values. I think this table was also made for gamma 1.4. So just be careful and see what is being asked and what parameters you are given with. Okay, moving on. Now we'll talk a bit about Hugonot equation. So this is a very important relation. Basically, we will talk about thermodynamic properties of fluid before upstream and downstream of a shock. Okay. So what we know so far? So far we have understood that static pressure is always increasing. Across a shock wave, basically what happens? Velocity decreases and pressure increases. So we can say that, or we can visualize a shock as a thermodynamic device. We can imagine that there is some imaginary device which is used to compress the gas. Okay, because pressure is increasing, so someone is compressing the gas. So you can imagine a shock in that way. Now, when we talk about a normal shock, let us first keep us limited to normal shock. So normal shock can be assumed to be a wave, and the properties can be expressed only in terms of thermodynamic variables. Okay, we'll talk about pressure, temperature, or density of approaching and exiting flow without talking about either velocity or Mach number. Okay, so we'll try to derive some equations where Mach number is not there specially. We will only try to relate P1, P2 to rho 1, rho 2 like that. Okay, let us see how we do that. So let us start with the continuity equation. This we have done previously. So for a flow past a shock, we can say that mass is conserved if you don't have more than one exits or something like that. So when your mass is conserved and we are referring to a flow in a straight pipe, so area is also constant. So we can straight away say that rho 1 v1 is equal to rho 2 v2. This is continuity or conservation of mass equation. So from this I can say v2 is equal to, just take the rho 2 other side, you will have v1 into this density ratio. What equation is this? Can anyone tell me what it is balancing, or what are the terms? We have discussed this. Come on.
Balancing.
Force balancing, or I can say this is momentum equation, right? So if I use this velocity term or this relation in this momentum equation, I will end up with this. Basically LHS is same. RHS, instead of V2 square, I am writing V1 square into rho 1 by rho 2. That is what I have replaced. Now from this I can say that V2 is equal to, just you simplify, take these terms to the RHS, you will find V1 square is equal to delta P by delta rho and density ratio. Okay, this is simple rearrangement, no, nothing else. Similarly, I can write, now here I have written V2 is equal to V1 by into density ratio. Similarly, I can write V1 is equal to V2 into this density ratio, rho 2 by rho 1. Okay, that is very obvious coming from conservation of mass. And similarly, in this equation, instead of replacing V1, V2, I will replace V1. So if I do that, I will get, like here I had a relation for V1 square, I will get another relation which is for V2 square. Same procedure is followed. Okay. Now, H I can write in terms of internal energy U and PV. This is basically the definition of H. So I'm not going to elaborate it. I can also write H, instead of U I can write E, which is which denotes energy, and E is there instead of V. V is basically the reciprocal of density. So instead of PV I can write P by rho. Okay, and this equation we have, this is the energy conservation equation. If you plug in H here, if I substitute, instead of writing H, I will write E plus P by rho, then I will get this form. Okay, so this is the only new term, otherwise same equation is there. Now V1 square, this we have found in the last slide, right? If I substitute V1 square here for this term, if I just replace V1 square by this, what I will get? Sorry, I will substitute V1 and V2 both. So V1 can be replaced by this, V2 can be replaced by this. So we'll get this equation. Okay, basically you have E1 plus E1 by rho, that will be the same. Now instead of V1 square by 2, I will have half of this quantity, half of this. Okay, you can see this and these are same. Similarly for RHS, E2 plus V2 by rho 2, this is exactly the same. Now instead of half rho V2 square, I will write half of this. Okay, now if you do some rearrangement, okay, some terms will be cancelled. We'll finally end up with delta E is equal to average pressure and rho 1 by rho 1 minus 1 by rho 2. Okay, now this 1 by rho 1 is basically reverse of your specific volume V1. So if I replace, instead of writing, I will write V1 minus V2. So you end up with this equation. This is called Hugoniot equation. Okay, so we'll see how to use, or what are the uses of this equation. We'll examine in later slides. So let us first examine this equation. Let us see what is so special or what is so helpful about this equation. So as you can see clearly, there is no mention of Mach number or velocity. Okay, this V is for specific volume. This is not for velocity. So we don't have any idea, or we don't incorporate the information of velocity or Mach number here. We are simply rating thermodynamic properties. Okay, we're talking about thermodynamic properties across the shock without specifically or explicitly referring to what is the velocity or Mach number. And we have made no assumptions which type of gas it is. We are just talking about trying to relate thermodynamic properties without any specific assumption. That's why this is a generalized assumption. It holds good for any gas you have. If it is a perfect gas, real gas. In fact, this is also, as I will show you one example, this Hugoniot relation is also very useful for combustion. So in combustion, we talk about detonation. So when the combustion wave is moving at supersonic speeds. So for that, we have Hugoniot curves. I'll show you one example moving forward. So what we are trying to state here is that this is a generalized equation which is useful for any type of gas what you have. Okay. Now we'll have this equation, and we also know, we can say that delta is, what is this? This is basically your average pressure, right? Half of P1 plus P2. And this is what? This is minus of delta V. Delta V will be V2 by V1. This is minus of that. So I can write minus of P average and delta V. So in words, what I can say is, this is the internal energy. Delta E of is change in internal energy, which is equal to mean pressure. This is the average of 1 and 2, right? Mean static pressure across the shock multiplied by change in specific volume, delta V. Okay, or I can see, it is very evident from here is that these equations, that internal energy is only a function of pressure and specific volume. There is no other term involved. There is no term for velocity or Mach number or anything. If you know pressure and volume, you can find what is your internal energy. That are only dependent variables. So for a simple compressible system, I can write that pressure P2 will be see in this equation P2, if you write P2, it will be a function of E, E1 and delta V, V1, V2. So I can write P2 as a function of E1, V1 and V2. Okay, so this is basically this is how we'll define or we'll draw the Hugoniot line. Okay, Hugoniot curve. So this is what a Hugoniot curve looks like. So basically this is this equation which you are plotting with x and y axis for pressure and specific volume. So y axis is for pressure, x axis is for specific volume, and you see that we have 2 points what we are talking about. Okay, let me draw that again for you. So basically we are referring to shock in a tube. That is the simplest case we took for basic analysis. Okay, flow is going past a stationary shock. We define property with subscript 1 and subscript 2 here. Okay, so 1 and 2 are the points which are known to us. We know what is the specific volume and pressure at those two locations. So this is a curve, Hugoniot curve, which is passing through 1 and 2, and the equation what we have seen in the last slide. And this also this is close to isentropic curve, but it will be different from isentropic. Okay. Now these are the relations which we have derived previously, right? We talked about V1 square and this. Now what we see in this equation or this plot. So basically it connects the geometry of the Hugoniot curve to the flow velocity and specific volume upstream of the shock. Okay, so whenever you have a shock in a very simplified geometry, what we can say is that what is required for you to know is the velocity and specific volume upstream of the shock. That is what it is connecting to. So V1 is this capital V is velocity, small v is specific volume. Don't get confused. Okay. Is this clear? Any questions up to here? Okay, I'm assuming that this is clear to everyone. Now, this is an interesting plot. So, this was a Hugoniot curve showing a shock wave. So, we are interested in flow properties across a shock. Now, similarly, as I told, we have Hugoniot curves for combustion also. For supersonic, when we have a blast, that there are many keywords associated. So, we will call detonation. So for detonation, this is how the plot will look like. Okay, let me draw it a bit for you. So this is the curve which is used for, let us say, a flame or a detonation wave. When you heard that there was a bomb blast or something, so this is the curve which is which represents those points with flame. Now, when we are talking about a normal shock, okay, this is the curve which is followed. Let me draw in some other color. We say blue. So what we have saw in the last slide, Hugoniot curve for a shock, this is what it will look like. So basically can anyone tell me what is the difference between this red and blue line? See, line is your normal shock, red line is normal shock plus combustion. So what difference will it make in terms of what you have studied so far? So one is your blue line and one is your red line. So any difference or they should be the same? What is the major difference between a non-reacting flow and a reacting flow? Yes, people are corrected or not, I don't know. You gone for lunch? Yes, students. People are here. Mohan Gupta, are you here? Let me check one more. Mohan Gupta, he is apparently not here. Rituraj,
Yes, sir.
okay.
Yes, sir.
Okay, let me take attendance. Rituraj. Neha Gautam, are you here?
Yes, sir.
Fine. Dharmendra Kumar? Dharmendra Kumar is not here. Shubhadeep?
Yes, sir.
Okay, Dharmendra Kumar is here. I think he is not able to speak. Anyway, fine, good. So just keep talking. Otherwise, I don't know whether you are not here or I have lost connection. So we talked about two curves. Just guess. Tell me what is the difference. These are the two curves. One is for a combustion wave. Okay, where all these points are there. X, Z, I, J, K. And one is, this is for, let me draw it for you again. So this is your curve for a normal shock. I got this from a combustion textbook, but this will represent your normal shock. And this black line is for a so what will be the difference between these two curves? What is the most basic fundamental difference between a burning fluid and without reaction fluid? Now this is, I have given quite a lot of hints. Anyone wants to attempt? Or just guess, tell something. What is the difference you think would be? Will there be any difference or not? Anyone? Let me again go back to your roll call. So we'll go one by one. Mohan, what do you think will be the difference between a burning reacting flow and non-reacting flow? What do you think is the major difference?
I'm not getting it, sir.
Okay, I will explain the question again. So in this plot, what you see here, you have two curves, right? You can see two lines. Can you see these two lines?
Yes,
Two
sir.
curves. Okay. So what I am saying is that this line, which is on the left, this is for a normal shock. Okay, what we have drawn in the last slide. So last slide, we have drawn a curve which is for a normal shock. Hugoniot curve for a shock wave compression. That is what we discussed. This is your textbook curve for your course. Okay, for compressible flow, we generally talk about this curve only. Now, I also teach combustion. So for combustion, I have one more curve which looks like this. Okay, so what this left side curve, this is for your normal shock, this is for a reacting flow. So what will be the difference? A very common sense, without even knowing gas dynamics, you can say what is
So
the
change
difference?
in energy.
Change in energy. Okay, you are going on the right track. Let me remind you, what was the what
Enthalpy,
was
sir.
the name? No. Last chapter you have studied, right? Last chapter before midsem. What was the name of the chapter? Let me open your syllabus. So this is what we have studied. Flow with friction and heat transfer, right? So what do you expect for a chemically reacting flow? Can I say that instead of burning fluid, I can have a simple fluid and I can add heat to mimic that behavior? Can I say that?
Yes, sir.
Okay, so I'm coming back to my question. My question is, I have one curve. Draw it again. I have one curve which is like this, which is for a normal shock. Okay, normal shock. And one more curve for this is for a burning shock, or let us say a shock wave followed by combustion. So you're on the right track, but I want to hear that word. So what will be the difference? If these two curves, mathematically, if I talk about these two curves, if I just look at this equation. So what will be the difference between green line and red line? This is flow without any chemical reaction. This is flow with chemical reaction. So what is the apparent shift in curve? Come on, I told you the topic of your last chapter. What the title of your last chapter? So cannot you relate it with that? Flow with heat transfer and friction. So do you think friction is of any concern in this? In a combustion, do we bother about friction? Yes or no? So what is the only parameter that is remaining? Flow with heat transfer. Right? That's what we have studied in the previous unit before mid-sem. So what do we call that? Flow with heat transfer. What line is relevant to that? Rayleigh or Fano? Come on, you people. I don't know what happened. You have written mid-sem, right? So you must know what is flow with heat transfer is what? Fano or Rayleigh?
Really? Really?
Correct. So that's what we are looking at here. So this curve left side again it is gone, but the you can see two black curves, right? Let me get a pointer now. So left side is the normal shock. Okay, this is just a shock. That's all. Right side is called detonation wave. Okay, so there's a lot of complicated theory behind it. You have to consider reaction. You have to consider shock wave compression also. But in a nutshell, you can say in a very simple terms, you can say you don't need to study combustion for that. But in a simplistic terms, I can say that the difference between these two curves is the heat addition, delta Q. Okay, that is all is important. So this difference is because of Q. So what we assume is when we study combustion, we say that if you want to break it down to a simple model. Okay, so you don't talk about any chemical reaction. You say that fluid is going in a tube. Okay, same configuration what we are talking about so far. So now in addition to that, I am also adding some heat. That's all. So that is the difference between these two curves. I can make one more curve with a different amount of Q. So the first curve that you see, this one, this basically represents a case where heat transfer is zero. Q is zero. That is what we are studying here. Hygronoid curve or shock wave. No heat transfer. That's all. Is this clear? What we are trying to figure out in this plot? Yes or no?
Yes, sir.
Yes.
Okay,
Yes.
fine. So moving on. So this is the Hygronoid relation what we have found out in last slide. Now here I need to substitute something. So CV I know is R by gamma plus 1. This we have discussed previously. Temperature can be written in terms of PV and R. Now we have LHS, we have E. E can be written as CVT, right? Now I can replace CV from here with this term and T can be replaced using this. So if I substitute these two equations in E and then I use the modified equation for I replace E here. So what I will get? I'll get something like this. So basically this gamma minus 1, R will get cancelled and you will have P1 V1 minus P2 V2. Okay, this P1 V1. And RHS will be average of pressure and delta V. This is minus delta V actually. Fine. If you further simplify it, basically you have to do some rearrangement, that's all. Some terms will get cancelled, some will become a ratio. So you can show that pressure ratio can be shown in this form. Okay. So this is one of the useful relation what we have got, and similarly we'll try to find out temperature ratio, density ratio going forward. Okay, now we'll talk more about moving shock. So just to show you an example, this is what we have discussed previously. Here we have, till now when you talk about flow in a, what do you say, flow in a tube, that is what we are discussing till now, right? So that is a case for stationary shock. Now we'll examine what happens when the shock is also moving. Here you see that plane is moving, and along with the plane the shock is also moving, right? This is not stationary. Or I can take one other example. Let us say I have a piston cylinder arrangement. I move the piston suddenly, so that will generate a shock wave that will travel along the tube. That is a moving shock that we'll study about in more detail. Okay, so basically a body moving at supersonic speed, it creates disturbance, and that disturbance travel with as a shock, and the motion of this disturbance is called wave motion, which is related to the fluid, and it has different types of waves, will have different wave speed. For this chapter we are mostly interested in shock wave, so we'll talk about that. And okay, because of these waves various parts of the body interact with fluid. Okay, and basically how much force the fluid is exerting on that particular body. For example, when you talk about the engine, what are the two terms which were interested for engine? When you design an engine, or let us say you design an aerofoil, what are the two parameters you look into? There are a lot of things that we study, but the two critical things what we are interested in, especially for a aerofoil, is drag and lift, right? Any other thing anyone thinks is more important? We want to know thrust, we want to know pollution and all that, but from a simple gas dynamics point of view, or aerodynamics point of view, we are interested in knowing how much for a particular design, or for a particular angle of attack. What I am interested to know is how much will be the drag and lift. So that is that parameters are determined by what type of shocks you are forming. Okay, so this is what basically shock governs how you interact with the fluid, and in turn that will determine how much resistance or how much lift you are generating. Okay, so this is what that is why moving shocks are important for a lot of practical application points. So we'll study about that. And plane wave, so basically we'll keep it simple. We'll talk about one-dimensional wave in a shock in a tube, what we are discussing so far. So we have discussed that in a tube shock is stationary. Now in the same tube with a constant area, we say that the shock is moving along the tube. Okay, that we can term as plane waves. So this is what we have discussed so far. We are saying that a flow is approaching the shock, and flow leaves at some velocity v2 at shock, but the shock is always stationary, right? This is what we are talking about so far. When we say that fluid is, now for this, shock is stationary and fluid is moving. Now if you assume the fluid tube is stationary, what will happen? Shock will start to move, right? Shock will start to propagate at the speed v1. Is this clear to you people or not? Right now what we have talked about is, we say that shock is stationary, fluid is approaching it. Now I say that fluid is at rest. So this is not approaching, but shock will be moving into the fluid at the same velocity v1. Is this clear?
Yes, sir.
Okay. So if we do that transformation, let us also add something. So let us say I have a piston here. So piston is moving with some speed v2, and because of this piston, some wave is generated. Let us say this is the shock wave which is traveling into the fluid at velocity cs. Okay, this is your typical or a simplified configuration for a moving shock. Okay, for that, what we can say, as we have discussed, that if the fluid is stationary, the shock is moving into the fluid with velocity v1. Here it is cs, so this cs will be equal to v1, right? And vp is basically the velocity behind the shock. So here it will be v1 minus v2, so vp will be v1 minus v2. Is this clear to everyone? How we are transforming from a stationary shock to a shock.
Yes, sir.
We just done some vector addition, that's all. Okay, so we are running out of time. We'll stop for today. This will try to wind up on Monday. Okay, we stop recording.